So what if I told you that there's a condition you could be living with right now,
Right.
like a totally invisible state of being that is actually doing as much damage to your cellular biology as smoking 15 cigarettes a day?
It sounds completely made up, honestly.
It really does.
Yeah.
But it's real. And it's a condition that accelerates cognitive decline, spikes your blood pressure, and, floods your system with the exact same stress hormones as if you're being actively hunted by a predator.
Yeah.
And the wildest part about this is that the people around you probably have no idea you're even suffering from it. I mean, they might actually think you're thriving.
Right. They might look at you and see a massive success.
Exactly. So welcome to this deep dive. Today we are unpacking something that sounds like science fiction or, I don't know, some exotic pathogen.
But it's actually one of the most common, ordinary experiences in the modern world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about the physical reality of profound human isolation.
And we should clarify right at the start, we are not just talking about, being alone on a Saturday night.
No, definitely not.
We're talking about the deep structural isolation of a life lived entirely behind a locked door.
Right. And to understand how anyone ends up in that incredibly dangerous state, we kind of have to look back at a piece of writing that predicted all of this modern neuroscience over 60 years ago.
Which is just staggering to think about.
It is. It's an insight that is so sharp and honestly so unsettling, it almost takes your breath away. It comes from C.S. Lewis, from his book, The Four Loves.
Yeah, that passage is foundational for everything we're looking at today.
It really is. And I want to read the entire passage for you, the listener, right now. Because like you said, it's the bedrock.
Go for it.
Okay, here's what he wrote. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken.
Such a heavy start.
Right. He goes on. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal.
Wow.
Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness.
The casket. Yeah.
But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It'll become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable.
I mean, it is just terrifyingly brilliant.
It really is. I get chills reading that.
Because if you look closely at the clinical observation Lewis is making there, he isn't just offering some poetic warning that being lonely is sad.
No, it's way more specific than that.
Right. He is identifying a mechanism. He's stating that the safety itself is the destructive force.
The casket alters the heart.
Precisely. If you take a human heart and place it in, absolute protective custody to ensure it never gets injured again.
The confinement changes it.
Yes. The confinement changes the fundamental nature of the thing you are trying to protect.
What you locked away to preserve it is warped by the preservation.
Exactly. Lewis is defining self-protection not as an absence of risk, but as an active, decaying force. It has its own downward trajectory.
It calcifies.
It does.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission for this deep dive is incredibly sensitive. And I want to be crystal clear with you listening right now.
Yeah, this is so important.
This is not a lecture on, putting yourself out there.
Please, no.
Right. We are absolutely not here to shame anyone for pulling away from the world.
Not at all.
If you are exhausted or if you've built a massive wall between yourself and other people, we are operating from the assumption that you did it because you were trying to survive.
That is the core assumption of the research we are drawing from today. Most people who have retreated into profound emotional isolation didn't do it out of malice.
Or coldness, right?
Exactly. They didn't do it because of some fundamental antisocial defect. They did it as a highly intelligent act of self-protection.
At the time they built the wall, it made complete sense.
It made perfect sense. The problem is, what happens when we can't figure out how to leave the shelter we built?
Right. So our journey today is to dismantle the mechanics of that locked door.
To figure out why we pull away in the first place.
And how the brain chemically changes when we stay away too long. What this withdrawal actually costs us. And most importantly, how to find the handle on the inside of the door.
Because there is a handle.
There is. But to even start that process, we have to address this massive illusion. I mean, if this isolation is so deadly, why doesn't anyone notice?
Right. Why don't our friends stage an intervention?
Exactly.
Well, it's because it rarely looks like isolation from the outside.
Isolation is a master of disguise.
It really is.
Yes.
It doesn't look like a person sitting alone in a dark, empty room. Often, it looks like success.
Or extreme competence.
Yes. But to spot the disguises, we have to define what we're actually looking for. We have to draw a hard line between solitude and self-isolation.
Which is tough because we use those words interchangeably in culture all the time.
We do, but psychologically, they're entirely different animals.
See, I always struggle with that distinction because I'm someone who desperately needs to be alone sometimes.
Yeah.
Like after a long week, if I don't get a few hours of absolute silence, I feel like I am vibrating out of my skin.
I think a lot of people relate to that.
Right. But is that the beginning of this locked door?
Not at all. Solitude is a fundamental biological human need.
Okay.
Yeah, you're fine. Solitude is the space where you process your life.
Where you think deeply or, just power down your nervous system from all the overstimulation.
Exactly. The defining characteristic of solitude is that it is chosen, it is bounded by time, and it is entirely restorative.
Bounded by time. That makes me think of a physical space. Like, solitude is like a vacation you take to a quiet cabin.
I like that analogy.
You pack a bag, you go enjoy the silence, but you have a return ticket in your pocket. You know you're going back to the city.
Right.
But self-isolation feels completely different. It's like a fortress you build to survive a siege, and then after the war is over, you just stay inside.
You completely forget how to unlock the gate.
Exactly.
That is exactly the dynamic. Solitude has a built-in mechanism of return.
You emerge from it actually more available to other people.
Yes, more present, more capable of connection. Self-isolation, on the other hand, isn't really a choice you make on a Tuesday. It's an accumulation.
A sprawling, depleting behavioral pattern.
It doesn't refresh you. It just drains your capacity to relate.
And it is a behavior, right? That
Yeah.
seems to be a crucial point in the research. It's not just a feeling.
Yes. We absolutely have to separate the feeling of loneliness from the behavior of self-isolation.
Because loneliness is an internal emotional gap.
Right. It's the painful difference between the amount of connection you currently have and the amount your biology requires.
Whereas social isolation is just a factual metric. Like how many people did you speak to today?
Exactly. But self-isolation is an active, ongoing strategy. It is the pattern of declining, deflecting, withholding, and disappearing by degrees.
Which brings us right to the disguises.
The ways we actively withhold and deflect while appearing completely normal.
When I was going through the materials on this, these highly functional, socially praised disguises really stopped me in my tracks.
They're jarring, aren't they?
They are, because they don't look like hiding. They look like virtue.
Let's talk about the first one. The person everyone loves. The helper.
Yeah, how on earth is the person constantly doing things for others actually isolated?
Well, it's the most brilliant disguise of all because it is universally rewarded by society.
Every family, every workplace, every neighborhood has a helper.
They're the bedrock. They remember everyone's dietary restrictions. They volunteer for the chaotic school fundraiser.
They loan you money. They give incredibly sound advice.
Right.
They sound amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, we all want that friend. So where's the trap?
The trap is that they have meticulously engineered a life where they are permanently the giver.
And never the receiver.
Never under any circumstances the receiver. They have established a dynamic where they are permanently the strong one.
Which means they never have to be vulnerable.
Exactly. If you look closely at that dynamic, what you realize is that usefulness is actually a fortress.
Wait, usefulness is a fortress?
Yeah.
You mean they are using their generosity to keep people away? That seems entirely counterintuitive.
Think about the mechanics of intimacy. True connection requires a relatively level playing field of vulnerability.
It requires you to occasionally say, I am drowning, I need you.
Yes. And the helper never says that.
Oh, wow.
By ensuring that everyone owes them a favor, by ensuring that they are the one providing the support, they get to completely control the terms of the relationship.
They get to be close to people, they feel involved, but they never have to expose their own uncertainty.
Or their own fear or their own incompetence.
So they get the warmth of the fire without ever having to take off their armor.
That's a perfect way to put it. They decide exactly when, how much, and how near people get.
You look at the helper and you think, what a saint.
Yeah.
But what they're really doing is making sure nobody ever sees them sweat.
They are profoundly loved for what they do, but they remain a total mystery in who they actually are.
That is so deeply sad when you frame it that way.
It's emotional isolation in its most respectable form.
You can be the most essential person in the room and still be the most unknown person in the room.
Absolutely.
And it reminds me of another disguise that feels incredibly rampant right now. Maybe the defining disguise of the 21st century.
The chronically busy.
Yes. The person whose entire life is just a blur of motion.
Their calendar is a solid, impenetrable block of colors.
Always an obligation, always a meeting, always an urgent email. I mean, I feel attacked right now.
We all do it to some degree.
But seriously, the research utilizes Brené Brown's concept of armor here, and it makes perfect sense.
It really does.
We talk about busyness as if it's a burden we're forced to carry. But it functions beautifully as a bodyguard against intimacy, doesn't it?
It is the ultimate bodyguard, because the calendar takes the blame for everything. If you are chronically busy, you don't have to look a friend in the eye and say, I am terrified of sitting across from you for 2 hours because I don't want you to see how depressed I am.
Instead, you just say, oh, I'm so slammed this quarter, I'm drowning in deliverables. Can we reconnect in the fall?
Exactly. The busyness explains why the friendship is withering, why the marriage is cold.
Why the phone calls are kept to 3 minutes.
And the really insidious part is that the person usually isn't lying.
They genuinely are swamped.
Yes, but they manufactured the swamp.
Oh, man. They manufactured the swamp.
The busyness is load-bearing. It is doing massive psychological work.
If that schedule were to suddenly collapse, like if they woke up on a Saturday with absolutely nothing to do,
No emails to check, no projects to manage.
they'd be faced with empty space.
And empty space is where the buried grief or the anxiety or the profound sense of emptiness rises to the surface.
So they maintain a frantic velocity to outrun their own internal life.
And by default, they outrun everyone else who tries to get close to them.
Because you can't hug someone who is sprinting. It's impossible.
No, you can't.
And closely related to the sprinter is the person who just refuses to let anyone carry their bags. The third disguise, excessive independence.
The stoic, the person who handles absolutely everything themselves.
Somewhere along the line in their development, needing help was classified not just as an inconvenience, but as a fatal weakness.
It became dangerous to need things, so they built an entire adult identity around self-sufficiency.
They're the person who will struggle alone with a flat tire on the side of a dangerous highway in the pouring rain for 2 hours.
Rather than make a 2-minute phone call to a friend that starts with the words, I need.
And we often mistake this for incredible strength.
Even the person doing it thinks they're just being strong and responsible.
They think, I'm self-sufficient, I don't burden other people.
But an absolute refusal to receive help isn't strength. It is a rigid, inflexible refusal to be vulnerable.
The text described it as a wall with good posture. I love that so much.
It looks like excellent posture, but it's rigor mortis.
Wow. It's a refusal to participate in the basic interdependence of being a human being.
We are a species that survived by sharing resources and carrying each other.
When you amputate your ability to receive, you are locking a massive part of your humanity in that casket Lewis was talking about.
You are actively severing the connective tissue that binds humans together. We bond through mutual need.
So when you have no needs, you offer no surface area for anyone to attach to.
Exactly. You're completely smooth.
Okay, I want to pivot to a disguise that completely threw me,
Which one?
because it's the exact opposite of the silent, stoic type. The fourth disguise is shallow fluency.
Oh, this one is fascinating.
How can someone who is incredibly talkative be isolated?
Think about the most charming person you know at a dinner party.
Okay.
They are quick, they are funny, they are warm, they keep the conversation flowing effortlessly,
Right.
and they are absolutely brilliant at asking you questions about your life.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. The conversational judo. They deflect the spotlight so smoothly you don't even realize it happened.
It is a profound skill. They keep the conversational momentum pointed entirely outward.
They'll ask you about your job, your kids, your recent vacation.
And they will validate all of your answers wonderfully. You can spend an entire evening with this person and walk to your car thinking, what a delightful, engaging human being.
But if your spouse turns you in the car and said, hey, how is John actually doing since his dad died?
Or, is he happy in his new job?
You would suddenly realize you spent 3 hours with the guy and you have absolutely zero idea what is happening in his soul.
Because the performance was flawless. Charm is incredibly effective camouflage.
It really is.
It operates like a locked door with a very ornate, plush welcome mat placed right in front of it.
You feel entirely welcomed, you feel entertained, you feel seen by them.
But you never actually step foot inside their house.
They control the narrative by ensuring it is never about them.
Right.
A locked door with a welcome mat. That is such a vivid way to see it. It's almost manipulative, isn't it?
It can feel that way, but usually it's not maliciously so.
They just cannot bear to be the center of vulnerable attention.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the final behavioral pattern. This one hurts to even talk about because it is so common and causes so much collateral damage.
The canceller.
The canceller. This pattern is agonizing on both sides.
It really is. The signature move of the canceller is that when an invitation is extended...
Say, hey, a few of us are getting coffee on Thursday morning. Do you want to come?
Right, they say yes. And this is crucial. They usually mean it sincerely at the exact moment of asking.
Some isolated, starved part of them genuinely wants that connection.
And they put it on the calendar.
But then Wednesday night rolls around.
And as the event approaches, the abstract idea of coffee turns into a concrete, terrifying reality of being perceived.
The perceived cost of being seen begins to loom larger and larger.
Their nervous system starts firing. It feels overwhelming.
So on Thursday morning, the text arrives.
I'm so sorry I woke up with a migraine.
Or, work just threw a massive crisis on my desk. I can't make it. Let's reschedule.
And each individual cancellation seems so minor. It's highly plausible. Life happens to everyone.
But over a timeline of 2 or 3 years, the pattern is devastating.
Because while the canceller thinks they are just managing their energy for that specific day, what they are actually doing is quietly, systematically training the people in their life to stop asking.
Because eventually, friends get tired of the rejection. They stop extending the hand.
And the phone does fall silent.
And here's the tragic psychological twist. How does the isolated person interpret that silence?
They do not look at their own behavior.
No. They experience the lack of invitations as concrete, undeniable evidence that nobody really cared about them in the first place.
The trap closes from the inside, but the person trapped reads the resulting silence as proof that the outside world is cruel and indifferent.
They manufacture their own abandonment and then use it as evidence that they are unlovable.
Wow. They curate the exact evidence they need to justify staying in the room.
Which leads us to the ultimate diagnostic question.
Yes.
If you're listening to this and you recognized yourself or someone you love in the helper or the busy person or the canceller, here's the question you have to sit with.
Is there anyone anywhere who knows how is actually going with you right now?
And we must be rigorous about what that means.
We do not mean the highlight reel on your social media.
We do not mean the sanitized, managed summary you give your colleagues at the water cooler.
We mean the unvarnished factual state of things.
Who knows about the crushing financial stress?
Who knows about the specific fear keeping you awake at night?
Who knows that your marriage is hanging by a thread? Or that you are terrified of your upcoming medical test?
If the answer is yes, if there is even one person who holds that truth for you, then regardless of how chaotic your calendar is, your door is open.
You have a tether to the world.
But if the answer is no,
And especially if the answer has been no for 5, 10, or 15 years,
then you are living behind the locked door. You have been in the casket so long that it just feels like the shape of the universe.
and if you're in that room, the most urgent question becomes, how did you end up there?
Because nobody does this for no reason.
Right. I think culturally, we are so lazy about this.
We are.
We label people who withdraw with insults. We call them aloof or antisocial or difficult or just private.
But those words only describe the exterior texture of the wall. They tell us absolutely nothing about the architecture or why the wall was constructed.
And nobody hauls thousands of bricks and builds a 10-foot wall just for fun.
They build it because something got in once, and it did terrible, catastrophic damage.
So to understand the origins of guardedness, we had to look at the machinery of human attachment.
John Bowlby's pioneering work in attachment theory is the foundation here.
So Bowlby was the researcher who looked at how infants and children bond with caregivers, right?
Yes, exactly.
How does that translate into a 40-year-old ignoring text messages?
Because Bowlby proved that our attachment needs are not childish phases we outgrow. They are permanent, evolutionary hardware.
We are built for connection from birth to death.
But that hardware requires software to run, and the software is written entirely by our early experiences. Bowlby called these internal working models.
Can you break down how a working model is formed? Because I think this is where the mystery of our own behavior really lives.
Sure. Imagine a very young child. They experience a need. They are scared or hungry or in pain.
Right.
They instinctively reach out for connection, crying for a caregiver. If they are reliably met with a warm, comforting response, their developing brain encodes a fundamental rule about reality.
It learns, on a deep neurological level that precedes language, that closeness is safe.
It learns that having needs is acceptable and that the world is a responsive place.
So they build an internal model of security.
Exactly.
But what happens if the response is different?
What if they reach out and are met with explosive anger or ridicule?
Or, maybe most damaging of all, just cold, terrifying absence.
Then the brain, which is a brilliant survival machine, builds a different working model. The brain learns a new rule. My need drives people away.
Or, showing vulnerability invites physical or emotional pain.
And Bowlby's genius was demonstrating that these aren't just conscious thoughts that we can easily argue away.
They become the invisible lens through which we process all future relationships.
That makes so much sense. A person doesn't walk into a networking event or a blind date consciously thinking, I have an insecure, avoidant attachment model based on maternal neglect.
No, they just think, I'm just not a needy person. I like my space. I don't let people get too close.
Exactly. The survival mechanism disappears into the personality.
If you take a nervous system that learned very early on that reaching out is dangerous, and you give it 30 years to operate in the adult world, it will reliably produce a locked door.
Not because the person is broken, but because a long time ago, in a very small body, isolation was the safest option available.
But it's not just childhood, is it? We can't blame everything on our parents.
No, adulthood provides its own highly effective bulldozers that can completely destroy our capacity to connect.
The research points to specific adult wounds that cause us to pour the concrete, starting with the devastation of betrayal.
Betrayal is arguably the sharpest and most transformative of the adult wounds.
It could be a spouse's long-term affair. It could be a business partner embezzling the company funds.
It could be a trusted mentor taking credit for your work, or a best friend sharing a profound confidence with others.
What makes betrayal so devastating is not just the loss of the specific relationship.
No, it is that it shatters the internal machinery of trust itself.
Because to be betrayed, you had to trust. You went all in, you handed someone the keys to your life, and they used them to rob you blind.
Right. And human beings are incredibly efficient learning machines.
When you touch a hot stove, your brain doesn't just learn to avoid that specific brand of stove.
It learns that glowing red coils equal pain.
When you experience profound betrayal, the mind draws a rapid, sweeping conclusion.
The catastrophic error was not trusting that specific person.
The error was the act of trusting at all.
Never again.
Exactly. Never again becomes a permanent, rigid scar tissue.
And if you apply the rule of never again to every single relationship for a decade, you will build a very quiet, very safe, incredibly isolated life.
Then there is the wound of humiliation. The literature says that guardedness is often just humiliation with a long memory.
And man, doesn't humiliation have the longest memory of any human emotion?
You can remember the exact layout of the room, the quality of the light, the smell of the air from a moment you were profoundly shamed in high school.
Or in a boardroom 10 years ago.
It has a photographic memory because the nervous system codes it as a mortal threat.
Historically, in a tribal setting, public humiliation was the precursor to exile, and exile meant death.
So when a person takes a risk, when they expose a creative idea or a tender emotion or a physical vulnerability,
And they are met with a wince or a cruel laugh,
or they discover they've become a running joke,
the nervous system absorbs that shock. And it learns to meticulously manage how much of the true self is ever made visible to the world again.
it's like wearing a hazmat suit just to go to the grocery store.
But then there's a third adult wound that we have to spend some time on, because this concept completely shifted how I view the people around me.
It's the concept of ambiguous loss, pioneered by Pauline Boss.
I had never heard this term before this deep dive, but once you explain it, you see it everywhere.
Pauline Boss's work is revolutionary for understanding modern isolation. To understand it, we first have to look at standard catastrophic grief.
When someone dies, we have a cultural script. We have a funeral. People bring casseroles.
But standard grief also isolates people because eventually society's rushed, impatient timetable for grief expires.
People want you to be better in 6 months.
And the grieving person, who is nowhere near done grieving, often withdraws simply because they cannot bear the exhausting daily performance of pretending they are over it to make other people comfortable.
Right. They hide because the discrepancy between their internal devastation and the world's demand for normalcy is too great.
But ambiguous loss is a different animal entirely. Boss calls it loss without a funeral. What does that mean?
It is a profound loss that carries absolutely no closure because the situation has not officially ended.
It is the psychological agony of a situation that is unresolved.
A classic example is a parent disappearing into the long, slow fog of Alzheimer's or dementia.
They are physically present, breathing in the room, but psychologically gone. You are grieving someone who is not dead.
Or the estrangement of an adult child. They are out there somewhere, living a life. They refuse to speak to you, but they might call tomorrow.
You are caught in a permanent purgatory of hope and despair.
Or even the profound, anchoring friendship that simply faded into silence over years without a fight, without an explosion, without any explanation.
Why does this specifically drive people behind the locked door?
Because the human mind categorizes and files information to move on. Ambiguous loss cannot be filed. It is a wildly messy, ongoing trauma.
And practically speaking, how do you even talk about it? I'm imagining a dinner party.
You sit down, pour a glass of wine, and an acquaintance casually asks, "Hey, how's your dad doing?"
Or how's your daughter? Is she still in Chicago?
That is the exact moment the trap springs. The person carrying the ambiguous loss has two terrible choices in that moment.
They can tell a massive, complicated, soul-crushing lie and say, oh, they're fine, doing great, which makes them feel like a fraud and deepens their internal isolation.
Or they can tell the messy truth and trigger an emotional landslide that completely ruins the lighthearted vibe of the dinner party.
And most people don't want to ruin the dinner party.
So they realize that participating in casual social life is a minefield. It is simply easier to decline the invitation.
Silence is the path of least resistance.
And what begins as a temporary retreat to avoid awkward questions becomes a habit. And a habit practiced for years becomes a life.
That makes so much sense. And running underneath almost all of these wounds, whether it's the betrayal, the humiliation, or the messy grief, is the heavy current of shame.
We have to bring Brené Brown's definitions in here, because the contrast between guilt and shame is the final brick in the wall.
It is a vital distinction. Guilt is tied to action. Guilt says, I did something bad.
I made a mistake. I caused harm.
While guilt is uncomfortable, it points outward, toward repair. It motivates you to apologize, to make amends, to reconnect.
Shame is tied to identity. Shame says, I am something bad. I am fundamentally broken, unlovable, or toxic.
And shame doesn't point toward repair. It points entirely toward hiding.
As Brown famously puts it, shame loves secrecy. It cannot survive being spoken, so its primary directive is to enforce silence.
The logic of shame dictates a preemptive strike. We must withdraw from the world before the world has a chance to withdraw from us.
The internal monologue of shame is so twisted, but it feels like absolute truth when you are in it.
It whispers, if they really saw me, if they saw the reality of the bankruptcy or how much I'm drinking or the humiliating details of the divorce, they would turn away in disgust.
So I will spare us both the awkwardness. I will turn away first. I will reject them before they can reject me.
It demands preemptive isolation.
And we must also acknowledge the clinical conditions that both feed on and generate this exact type of isolation.
Social anxiety, which hijacks the nervous system and turns every casual interaction into a high-stakes life or death exam.
Depression, which installs the heavy, suffocating lie that you are a burden to others and they are better off without you.
Trauma, which rewires the brain to perceive the entire human species as inherently dangerous.
Okay, wait. I'm stuck on something here. If we look at all of this, the childhood attachment wounds, the brutal betrayals, the unresolvable grief, the clinical anxiety. If I had a friend who went through a devastating betrayal and they decided to pull back, stop dating, stop going to parties, and just stay home for a while, I would tell them that was a smart move.
Right. I'd say, take a step back, protect yourself.
But the research frames this as the problem. Isn't withdrawing a highly intelligent solution to pain?
You have hit on the crucial paradigm shift. The withdrawal absolutely was an intelligent solution. It was not a malfunction.
So the wall was a good idea.
The psychological math was completely correct at the time.
When your nervous system is overwhelmed, withdrawing reduces real immediate pain.
It restores a baseline sense of control to someone who feels the world has spun completely out of their grasp.
It mathematically lowers the genuine statistical risk of being hurt again by a species that has just vividly demonstrated its capacity to cause you profound agony.
The tragedy of the locked door is not that the person built a shelter to survive a storm.
Then what is the tragedy?
The tragedy is what happens when a temporary shelter becomes a permanent identity.
A shelter is judged by one criterion, whether you can eventually walk out of it when the storm passes.
And the locked door has a hidden, terrifying property that nobody warns you about when you first turn the deadbolt.
It maintains itself. The lock tightens on its own, not because of what happened in the past, because of what the isolation does to your brain in the present.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a little frightening.
If pulling away was a smart, temporary survival tactic, why do we stay stuck in that windowless room for decades?
Why don't we just heal and come back out? To answer this, we have to look at the literal neuroscience of the trap.
The research dives deep into the work of John Cacioppo, who was essentially the founder of social neuroscience.
Cacioppo's research is the hinge upon which our entire modern understanding of loneliness turns.
For centuries, we viewed loneliness as a character flaw, or a psychological accident, or just a symptom of a sad life.
Cacioppo approached it from an evolutionary biological perspective. He proved that loneliness is a biological alarm system, identical in function to physical pain, hunger, or thirst.
Right, if you don't drink water, your body produces the physical sensation of thirst to force you to find a river. It's a survival mechanism.
Exactly. Now, apply that to human history. Human beings survived as a species entirely because we stayed in cooperative groups.
Alone on the ancient savanna, a single human being is incredibly weak, slow, and highly edible.
We have no armor, no venom, no real claws, but in a synchronized group, we are the apex predator of the planet.
Therefore, evolution installed a critical alarm system. When you drift away from the protection of the tribe, your brain produces the deep, visceral, physical pain of loneliness.
It is an evolutionary distress signal screaming, "You are outside the perimeter, you are exposed, get back to the fire."
So for hundreds of thousands of years, that alarm worked perfectly. You wandered too far, you felt the sharp pain of loneliness, you got scared, you moved back to the group, and the alarm shut off.
But Cacioppo looked at the modern world and asked, what happens when the alarm stays on?
What happens to the biological machinery when we lock the door, ignore the pain, and stay isolated for years?
The brain actually changes, doesn't it?
It undergoes a radical shift. A brain experiencing chronic, unresolved loneliness enters a permanent state of threat surveillance.
Because, to the ancient brainstem, being alone isn't just an emotional bummer. It is a state of mortal, physical danger.
So the brain becomes hypervigilant. It reallocates resources. It starts scanning the social horizon for signs of rejection or attack in the exact same way a soldier on patrol scans a tree line for snipers.
But if you are actively, desperately looking for a threat, you are going to find one, even if you have to invent it.
That is the diabolical loop Cacioppo discovered. He proved in laboratory settings, using fMRI machines and behavioral studies, that lonely people actually evaluate identical social information differently than socially connected people do.
Ambiguous signals are automatically interpreted as hostile.
Can you give me an example of how that works in real time?
Imagine two people receive the exact same text message from a friend that says, "Can't make it tonight."
A connected person reads that and thinks, oh, bummer, they must be busy. I'll catch them next week.
The lonely person, whose brain is locked in threat surveillance, reads the exact same text and thinks they are deliberately avoiding me. They never wanted to go in the first place. This is a rejection.
A neutral facial expression across a room is read as disgust. A slight pause in a conversation is interpreted as boredom and contempt.
The lonely brain resolves every single uncertainty in the direction of maximum danger.
They don't know it's a lens, though. That's the scary part. They experience their corrupted, hyper-paranoid perception as absolute, objective reality.
Which creates a devastating self-fulfilling prophecy.
Let's trace the mechanics of this loop, because it explains why it is so hard to help someone who is isolated.
The lonely person, completely primed by their brain to expect rejection, is invited to a gathering. They decide to go, but they walk into the room braced for impact.
They are physically stiff, their arms are crossed, their tone is guarded, maybe a little cold, ready to pull away at the first sign of a slight.
And what do the perfectly normal, friendly people in the room do?
They read that guarded, stiff, unapproachable body language, and they naturally, subconsciously respond by keeping a polite distance.
They don't want to intrude on someone who looks miserable. That's as a normal human response.
But what does the lonely person's hypervigilant brain do with that polite distance?
It detects it instantly.
Yeah.
And records it as hard, undeniable confirmation. See, I knew it. People always pull away from me. I am fundamentally unlikable.
The evidence mounts. The withdrawal deepens. The brain turns the threat surveillance dial even higher. Around and around it goes.
The isolated person unknowingly manufactures the exact rejection they fear through their own defensive posture and then uses that very reaction as concrete proof that the world is entirely unsafe.
They are reasoning logically from completely corrupted data.
And this brings us right back to C.S. Lewis in the introduction. He intuited this entire neurological process decades before Cacioppo had the technology to map it.
Lewis said the heart in the casket will change. He understood that self-protection is not a static preservative.
It actively, aggressively alters the thing it is protecting and makes it unable to participate in reality.
But the research argues that the modern world is essentially pouring gasoline on this internal neurological fire.
It used to be that society had built-in mechanisms to drag us out of this loop, even when our brains were screaming at us to hide.
Yes. Historically, what broke the cycle of isolation wasn't necessarily deep therapy or sudden bursts of courage. It was sheer, unavoidable, structural, social friction.
Sociologists call them third places, the spaces that are not home and not work.
Diners, church pews, union halls, local lodges, neighborhood pubs, the barber shop.
These were places of unplanned, low-stakes, mandatory collisions.
The key word there is low stakes. You didn't have to be brave to go to the diner. You just had to be hungry.
Exactly. You didn't have to initiate a highly vulnerable conversation about your feelings.
You just kept showing up at the same counter every Tuesday morning, and familiarity did all the heavy lifting.
You ordered coffee, you nodded at the guy next to you, you complained about the weather.
The physical structure of society literally carried the shy, the wounded, and the grieving. It forced them into proximity with other humans until the threat surveillance system eventually powered down.
But today, those third places have withered, or they've been replaced by drive-thrus and delivery apps.
And the research points out that the shift to remote work has radically accelerated this. Remote work removed the very last mandatory gathering place for millions of adults. The office and society generally celebrated it as a massive upgrade in lifestyle.
The result is a total catastrophic loss of social friction.
Think about the modern architecture of a day. You can wake up in your apartment, log into your job remotely, order your groceries to be left on your porch, do your banking on an app, stream endless entertainment, and go to sleep without having a single, unplanned, face-to-face encounter with another human being.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room, the smartphone.
Now, the authors are careful not to just sound like angry Luddites yelling at a screen. Technology didn't invent isolation. People were locking doors and becoming hermits long before iPhones existed.
But what the screen does to the isolated brain is uniquely insidious.
It is uniquely dangerous because it operates as social saccharin.
Saccharin tastes exactly like sugar. It triggers the sweet receptors on your tongue, but it contains absolutely 0 calories, 0 nutrition.
The screen provides a perfect, flawless neurological simulation of social participation. You open an app, you see faces, you hear arguments, there is laughter, there is conflict, there is tragedy.
It engages every single social circuit and empathy receptor in your brain.
But it requires 0 actual vulnerability. It is an entirely one-way street. I can scroll through a feed for 4 hours, feel exhausted by the drama, feel like I've been deeply socializing, but I haven't been perceived by a single living soul.
I haven't risked anything.
And that is why it is so lethal to the isolated person. It feels just good enough to muffle the evolutionary alarm.
Remember, the pain of loneliness is supposed to drive you out of the cave to find the tribe. But the screen medicates the symptom just enough to keep you comfortably inside the locked room.
Plus, it grants the wounded person total godlike control over the interaction. You can carefully edit the text message. You can curate the photo with a filter.
There is no tone of voice to misread. No awkward, real-time pauses to navigate. No risk of sudden rejection.
It is connection with the risk surgically removed, which means, by definition, it isn't connection at all. It's just consumption.
It's terrifying when you zoom out and see how perfectly the internal neurological trap of threat surveillance locks into the external convenience of the modern world.
They fit together like gears in a machine designed to produce isolation.
And while those gears turn effortlessly, the years go by and eventually the bill comes due. The body and the mind keep an exact ledger.
Yes, let's look at that ledger. What isolation actually takes from us.
And the researchers are very careful here to frame this. We aren't outlining these consequences to scare anyone into socializing.
Fear built the door. Fear is a terrible tool for opening it. This is simply about clinical honesty. We need to look at the physical toll first because the statistics here are mind-bending.
The central data point comes from Julianne Holt-Lundstad, a preeminent researcher who conducted massive meta-analyses, gathering data on millions of people across decades to answer one specific question. Does social connection predict who lives and who dies?
And the answer wasn't just, yes, having friends makes you a little healthier.
The answer shook the medical community. The data reveal that lack of social connection is a mortality risk on par with smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
It is more dangerous to your physical health than obesity. It is more dangerous than physical inactivity. Chronic isolation is one of the most physically lethal, ordinary conditions a human being can live in.
But I need to understand the mechanism here. Why does simply being alone kill you? A lonely person sitting on a couch reading a book isn't inhaling carcinogens. How does it destroy the body?
It goes back to the evolutionary alarm we discussed. A body that perceives itself to be separated from the tribe believes it is in imminent mortal danger of being eaten or freezing to death.
You might logically know you are safe in your apartment, but your ancient brainstem does not.
So it triggers a permanent fight or flight response. It floods your system with stress hormones like cortisol, your blood pressure spikes, and most destructively, chronic inflammation sets in.
The immune system goes onto a permanent, exhausting war footing. And chronic systemic inflammation is the primary biological driver of heart disease, stroke, and dementia.
The research also highlights severe sleep degradation. The isolated person experiences constant micro-awakenings. Their sleep architecture is ruined because the brain knows there is no sentry on duty.
No one is keeping watch at the mouth of the cave, so you sleep with one eye open. That is so profound to me.
Your body runs hot, constantly revving the engine in neutral, and engines that run hot constantly eventually burn out.
And the mind pays an equally devastating toll. Isolation is a lush, tropical greenhouse for depression. The two conditions feed each other endlessly.
Cognitive decline accelerates rapidly in isolated populations. Why? Because fluid, real-time human conversation is actually the most complex, demanding computational exercise the human brain performs. Without that constant exercise, the neural pathways literally atrophy.
And we have to talk about addiction. The text makes a brilliant point. Secrecy is the primary accelerant of addiction, and isolation is just secrecy with the lights turned off.
Exactly. Think about the guardrails of a connected life. A drinking problem, or a pill addiction, or a gambling habit that would have been noticed, challenged, and confronted by a spouse or a close friend in a connected life can run completely unchecked for decades behind a locked door.
Because the door was expressly built to keep observers out, the isolation protects the addiction.
But as horrifying as the physical and mental tolls are, the research argues that the deepest, most tragic toll is relational.
Because when you build a massive, impenetrable wall to stop pain from getting in the wall, it doesn't discriminate.
It stops the pain, absolutely, but it stops everything else, too. It stops the entire supply line that makes a human life bearable.
It creates a complete embargo. First, it stops comfort. Life is inherently difficult. Blows will land.
When you get a terrifying medical diagnosis, or lose your job, or wake up engulfed in panic at 3 a.m., there is no hand on your shoulder.
The blows of life land with full, unmitigated kinetic force. They don't disperse across a network of friends. They accumulate entirely in your own body.
It also stops correction. The research calls this the loss of guardrails. When you are deeply isolated, nobody is pushing back on your bad ideas.
Nobody raises an eyebrow when you make a reckless financial choice, or when you start treating people poorly, or when your thinking becomes paranoid.
And the tragic irony is, the isolated person usually feels this lack of correction as absolute freedom. No one is meddling in my business. I am sovereign.
Right, it feels like glorious, unhindered independence, right up until the moment they drive their life off a cliff that a friend sitting in the passenger seat would have warned them about 3 miles back.
Perspective also stops at the wall. You become a windowless room, continuously recycling your own conclusions. Your grievances grow in the dark.
If someone sliked you at the grocery store, you don't have a friend to text who can say, oh, forget them, they were just having a bad day.
So you sit in your house, and the slight inflates into a massive conspiracy about how awful humanity is, because there is no outside data to puncture the balloon.
And then there's the loss of shared memory. Philosophically, this might be the most devastating loss of all. In connected life, your friends and family act as the custodians of your past.
They are the witnesses to your existence. They can say, I was there, you really did that, you survived that awful year, you used to be so funny when we worked together.
Without a witness, whole decades begin to feel faintly unreal. You lose the anchor to your own timeline, because reality is fundamentally a group project.
If you are entirely alone for 20 years, did those years even happen? Who holds the proof?
Finally, the very capacity to receive stops at the wall. The machinery rusts shut. If you offer genuine, warm, no-strings-attached help to someone who has been profoundly isolated for 20 years, watch their physical reaction.
They will often flinch. They physically and psychologically cannot accept it. They don't know where to put the kindness.
Which circles us all the way back to the beginning, back to C.S. Lewis. Those 3 terrifying words he used to describe the heart in the casket. Unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. Now we see exactly what he meant neurologically and socially.
Lewis nailed the pathology. Unbreakable means numbness. The heavily guarded heart loses the sensitivity and responsiveness that made it capable of feeling joy or awe or deep love in the first place.
Impenetrable means exactly what we just discussed. The embargo. Nothing gets in. The blow bounces off, but the comfort and the grace bounce off too.
And irredeemable describes the trajectory. Every single year spent in the casket makes the door heavier, the muscles weaker, the threat surveillance sharper, until the person who originally chose to lock the door approaches the terrifying condition of no longer having the strength to open it.
Isolation slowly, methodically strips you of the equipment needed to be a human being. That is heavy. That is a dark place to arrive at. But the research doesn't end there, and neither does our deep dive. The trajectory bends toward the casket, but a trajectory is not a destination.
The literature, the psychology, and the neuroscience all confirm that recovery is absolutely possible.
Lewis warned that the heart changes. He never once said the door locked from the outside.
Yes, the handle is on the inside. You still have your hand on it.
So let's talk about turning that handle.
Yeah.
How do we come back? Because the standard well-meaning advice we give to isolated people is actually terrible.
It really is disastrous advice. The standard cultural response to a lonely person is, you just need to put yourself out there, join a club, go to a party, download a dating app.
And why does that fail so spectacularly? Because it usually just sends them running right back to the room.
It fails because it is entirely premature, and it fundamentally misunderstands the mechanism of isolation. It violently triggers the brain's threat sentry.
Remember, the isolation is a heavily armed fortification. Telling someone to just put themselves out there at a loud party is asking them to spontaneously disarm in front of the exact dangers they built the fortress to survive.
The brain will scream, "Danger!" and shut the system down.
So the very first step of returning to the world isn't an outward movement at all. It is an inward movement.
The essential first step is to sit quietly and ask one incredibly honest, precise question. What is this isolation protecting?
You have to identify the ghost. You have to name the specific shame or the specific grief or the specific betrayal that caused you to pour the concrete in the first place.
Because until you name it, every social effort you make will be quietly sabotaged by your own internal security system. The sentry in your basement still believes the wall is the only thing preventing your total annihilation.
But once you name the guarded thing, I am hiding because I am terrified. I will be abandoned again like I was in my first marriage. A miracle happens. The threat shrinks.
You realize the defense is outdated. You're standing guard against a battle that ended 20 years ago. The war is over. And the research notes that professional therapy is mathematically elegant for this specific stage of the return.
Therapy gets a bad rap in some circles as being self-indulgent. But for profound isolation, it is the perfect tool. Therapy is at its core a relationship with the stakes removed. It is an antechamber.
It is a safe, controlled, low-stakes room where you can practice the exact skills your isolation dismantled. Being honest, being seen, and being received by a professional whose literal job is not to flinch, not to judge, and not to abandon you.
Okay, so you've done the inward work. You know what you're protecting. You've practiced in the antechamber. Now comes the outward movement into the world. And the absolute rule here, according to the research, is gradual doses.
Avoid grand gestures. Do not throw a dinner party for 20 people.
Grand gestures fail because your social muscles have severely atrophied. You don't try to run a marathon the day they take you out of a full-body cast. The steps back have to be almost insultingly small.
Answer a text message today, not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Return a phone call and talk for 5 minutes. Accept an invitation for coffee that you normally would decline on pure reflex.
And then, this is the crucible, the really hard part. When Thursday arrives and the dread sets in and your brain is screaming at you to cancel, don't.
Show up. Stay for 1 hour. Tolerate the discomfort. Go home. And then do it again.
And to make that exhausting repetition easier, the researchers highlight the sheer mechanical power of the recurring gathering. We talked earlier about the loss of third places. This is where you intentionally reclaim them.
The weekly religious service, the Thursday night bowling league, the standing Friday morning coffee group, a volunteer shift at the animal shelter. The magic of the recurring gathering is that it removes the need to be continuously, actively brave.
You only have to fight your way through the dread and open the door the first time. After that, the structure carries you. You don't have to invite anyone. You don't have to plan an itinerary. You don't even have to be particularly vulnerable or talkative. You just have to be physically present.
Just put your body in the room. And presence, repeated over time, inevitably breeds familiarity. And familiarity, almost without your permission, eventually breeds belonging.
Just keep showing up. And somewhere in those repetitions, in the quiet moments of those gatherings, you will eventually reach what the psychologists call the hinge moment.
The moment everything else has been preparing you for. Telling one true thing to one trustworthy person.
This is the turning point. You don't have to dump your deepest, darkest trauma on a stranger at the bowling alley. It is just one true thing. It's been really hard lately. Or, I've been pretty isolated since my mom passed away. Or, I'm actually really anxious about this project.
This is the first real crack in the wall. This is the first live fire test of your nervous system's old theory that being seen means being destroyed. And connecting back to Brené Brown's research, when you speak that small piece of shame or truth, and it is met with empathy or just a nod of understanding from the other person, the shame is completely oxygen-starved. It dies in the light.
The isolated person always expects their disclosure to land like a horrifying radioactive confession. But in reality, it almost always lands like a gift. The other person usually leans in. They usually relax, because your vulnerability gives them permission to be human too.
They usually share a true thing of their own. That simple exchange is the bedrock foundation of all human friendship.
But as you embark on this slow return, the literature insists there are two hard truths you absolutely must install in your mind, or the very first setback will completely derail you and send you running back to the casket.
Number 1, awkwardness is not evidence.
I need to print this on a t-shirt. Awkwardness is not evidence. When you start socializing again after years behind the door, you are going to feel incredibly rusty. You will tell a joke that falls completely flat. You will leave a pause hanging way too long. You will say the wrong thing.
And your hypervigilant threat surveillance brain will immediately sound the alarm and scream, "See, I told you they hate you. You are a freak. Retreat to the room immediately."
But it's not evidence of rejection. It just means you are out of practice. It's like riding a bike after 20 years. You are going to wobble. You have to remain present through the awkwardness. And the comforting truth is, everyone is way too worried about their own awkwardness to meticulously audit yours anyway.
And the second hard truth is even more crucial. Disappointment does not require disappearance. Because here is the reality of human connection. Someone, eventually, is going to fail you. A friend will forget to invite you to something. A confidence might be handled clumsily. Someone will say something insensitive.
This is the ultimate test. Because the old ingrained reflex is to generalize that one specific failure to the entire human species, slam the giant iron door shut, and call it wisdom.
The new practice, the discipline of returning, is to let one disappointment be exactly that. One disappointment. You downgrade a letdown from a final catastrophic verdict on the inherent evil of humanity to a single, localized data point about one specific interaction.
So what does this all mean? Does this mean the goal is to just blindly trust everyone, to swing the pendulum completely to the other side, tear down the house, and walk around with absolutely no boundaries, letting everyone trample us?
No, absolutely not. That isn't health. That's just a different kind of self-destruction. The ultimate goal is to understand the distinction between wisdom and fear. Wisdom evaluates people on a case-by-case basis. It looks at the specific person in front of you, their track record, their capacity, and adjusts the level of trust accordingly.
Fear evaluates no one. Fear is lazy. Fear just builds one giant, monolithic, 100-foot wall around the entire world and calls it experience. The goal of this journey is to move from generalized fear back to specific wisdom.
To be discerning rather than completely defended. Which brings us to the end of our journey today and beautifully loops us back to C.S. Lewis. Because in that brutal quote, Lewis laid out an unstated choice that every single human being has to make. It was never a choice between being hurt and being perfectly safe. That is the great intoxicating lie of the locked door. You are never perfectly safe.
The choice is actually between two different kinds of suffering. You can choose the sharp, survivable, honest pain of loving, in a world where love is not guaranteed, where hearts get wrung out and broken. Or you can choose the slow, cumulative, disguised, suffocating pain of the sealed room. The first kind of suffering is the price of admission to being alive. The second kind just slowly, quietly hollows you out until there is nothing left.
Vulnerability isn't weakness. It is the absolute prerequisite for a human life.
And this raises one final vital question, a thought that builds on everything we've explored today. We spent this entire time talking deeply about the individual personal cost of the locked door, what it does to your body, your brain, your heart. But what happens to the broader fabric of society when millions of us individually, quietly choose the locked room?
Oh, wow. We become a society of caskets.
Our personal isolation doesn't just starve us. It starves our communities. The ecosystem of humanity relies on interaction. When you hide, the world loses the exact friction, the unique comfort, the specific guardrails, and the shared memory that your community desperately needs to survive. Every single time you turn that handle from the inside and walk out, even if you are terrified, you aren't just saving your own heart. You are actively reclaiming a vital piece of the shared human world that desperately needs your unique presence.
That is beautiful, and it changes the stakes completely. It's not just about you getting healthier, it's about the ecosystem needing you to participate.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. The journey out of the room is incredibly slow, the hinges might be rusted shut, and the light might hurt your eyes at first. But remember this, the bravest thing a human being can possibly be is reachable. Turn the handle. And maybe think about this. We can't see the brokenness of isolation on an X-ray. It's totally invisible, but we can see the healing. We see it every single time someone chooses to show up, carrying all their awkwardness, and simply says, "Here I am, until next time."